They smiled at me while plotting behind my back. It ends tonight. Subscribe and don't miss a second of the revenge. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. FBI. Those three letters don't typically precede good news, especially when they're asking about your little sister and whether you knew she'd been hosting unauthorized events in a federally regulated biosafety Level 2 laboratory. I sat there in my apartment, phone pressed against my ear, watching my breath fog in the cold air because I'd forgotten to turn on the heat. The agent's voice was clinical, detached. "Dr. Reeves, we need you to come down to the facility immediately. There's been a significant breach of protocol." My lab, the place I'd spent 7 years building from nothing, compromised. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back 6 months to the day my mother called and asked me to do just one tiny favor for Madison. I should explain something about my family first. We're what you might call aggressively upper middle class, the kind of people who vacation in the Hamptons but complain about the cost, who drive German cars but lease them, who sent their kids to private schools and never let them forget it. My father's a cardiovascular surgeon. My mother ran a successful interior design firm before retiring. And Madison, my younger sister by 4 years, has always been their golden child. I was the difficult one, too focused on my studies, too serious, not social enough. When I chose microbiology over medicine, my father barely spoke to me for a year. When I got my PhD at 26 and immediately landed a position at a prestigious research institute, he mentioned at dinner once that at least one of his children had accomplished something academic, then spent the rest of the evening discussing Madison's engagement to Trevor Huntington III, whose family owned a chain of luxury hotels. Madison had majored in communications at a state school, worked briefly at a marketing agency, then quit when Trevor proposed. She didn't need to work, she'd explained sweetly at that same dinner. She was going to be a wife and mother the traditional way. My mother had beamed at her like she'd announced a cure for cancer. I'd gone home that night to my small apartment and my small life and told myself I didn't care. The lab became everything to me after that. My position at the institute was remarkable. I was the youngest principal investigator they'd ever hired. My research focused on antibiotic-resistant bacteria, specifically developing novel compounds that could combat the growing crisis of superbugs. It was important work, world-changing work. But the real breakthrough came 3 years into my tenure. I discovered a peptide sequence that showed unprecedented efficacy against MRSA and other resistant strains. The implications were staggering. The Institute recognized it immediately. Within 6 months, I'd been given a grant proposal to write. Within a year, I had $1.5 million in combined federal and private funding. The new lab was built to my exact specifications. Biosafety Level 2, which meant controlled access, specialized ventilation systems, autoclaves, biohazard protocols, and federal oversight. The space was beautiful in the way only a scientist could appreciate: clean lines, efficient design, state-of-the-art equipment. Everything monitored, everything documented, everything perfect. I spent 16-hour days there. The peptide research expanded. We began clinical trials. I published in Nature. My name started appearing in conversations about the Nobel Prize, distantly, speculatively, but still. My father called me for the first time in 8 months to say he'd told his golf buddies about my work. He still didn't really understand it, but he'd bragged nonetheless. For a moment, I belonged. Then came my mother's phone call. "Sweetheart, I have the most wonderful news." Her voice had that particular brightness that meant she wanted something. "Madison and Trevor have set a date, June 15th. It's going to be absolutely spectacular." I made appropriate congratulatory noises while reviewing data on my laptop. Now, here's the thing. Her tone shifted to conspiratorial. Madison's been looking at venues, and everything is either booked or outrageously expensive. You know how wedding venues are. But then she had the most creative idea, and I told her she absolutely had to ask you herself, but I wanted to plant the seed first. My hands stilled on the keyboard. Your lab has that beautiful atrium space, doesn't it? The one with all the glass and natural light. Madison saw the photos from your opening ceremony last year, and she thought it would be so unique and modern. And, Mom, that's not a venue. That's a research facility. Well, yes, but it's so spacious. And think of how special it would be having her wedding at her brilliant sister's workplace. It would mean so much to her, to all of us. I closed my eyes. It's a federally regulated laboratory. There are protocols, safety measures. We can't just, it's one evening, honey. One special evening for your sister. You could close the lab for the day. Move the important things. You're the director. Surely you have that authority. It doesn't work like that. So you're saying no. The warmth had evaporated from her voice. You're saying no to your own sister's wedding, the most important day of her life. I'm saying it's impossible. The liability alone. You know, your father and I paid for your entire education. Every penny. We supported you through all those years when you were too busy studying to even have a relationship. And now, when we ask for one thing, one single thing, you can't be bothered. The guilt landed like it always did, heavy and suffocating. Let me think about it. I heard myself say, that's all we're asking. Just think about it. Talk to whoever you need to talk to. I'm sure you can make it work if you really want to. After she hung up, I sat in my office for an hour, staring at nothing. Madison called the next day. She was crying within 30 seconds. I know Mom already talked to you, and I know you probably think I'm being ridiculous, but Sarah, I've dreamed about my wedding my entire life. She sniffled delicately, and when I saw those pictures of your lab, it just felt so right, like it was meant to be. Trevor's family has all these expectations, and his mother keeps trying to control everything, and I just wanted one thing that felt like me, like us, like family. Maddie, the regulations, I know, but couldn't you just ask? Maybe there's a way. We'd be so careful. We wouldn't touch anything. It would just be the atrium area, where there aren't even any experiments happening, right? I press my fingers against my temples. There are still protocols. Everything in the building is monitored. We have federal compliance requirements. Please. Her voice broke. You're my sister. My only sister. I've always looked up to you so much, even though I know I never said it enough. You're so smart and accomplished, and I'm just me. But this is the one day I get to feel special. The one day that's about me. The manipulation was so elegant, I almost admired it. Let me talk to the oversight committee. I said, finally. I'm not promising anything. Her squeal of delight made my ear ring. I didn't talk to the oversight committee. I knew exactly what they'd say. Instead, I spent 2 weeks researching every regulation, every clause, every possible loophole. There wasn't one. Using a BSL-2 facility for private events was explicitly prohibited. The insurance alone would be a nightmare. And if anything went wrong, if anyone got sick, if any contamination occurred, my career would be over. The lab could lose its federal funding. The research would stop. But Madison called every other day. My mother called in between. Even my father weighed in during one uncomfortable dinner where he suggested I was being unnecessarily rigid and perhaps a bit jealous of my sister's happiness. The breaking point came when Madison showed up at my apartment with wedding magazines and tears in her eyes, explaining that Trevor's mother had just booked the plaza without asking them, and it was all wrong. and she felt so powerless. And couldn't I please help her have just one thing that felt like hers? I looked at my little sister, golden-haired, perfect-skinned, perpetually favored Madison, and I saw something I'd never quite noticed before. She looked desperate. Not manipulative, not spoiled. Desperate. "Okay," I said. "I'll figure something out." Her embrace nearly knocked me over. The plan I constructed was meticulous. I would close the lab for a long weekend, citing equipment maintenance and safety inspections. I would personally oversee the temporary storage of all sensitive materials in the backup facility across campus. I would hire a specialized cleaning crew with biohazard training to sanitize everything before and after. I would install temporary barriers to seal off all laboratory spaces, limiting access to only the atrium and attached conference room. I would be there the entire time, personally ensuring nothing went wrong. I documented everything. I created safety protocols. I drafted liability waivers. I did everything except tell the oversight committee because I knew they would say no, and I'd already promised Madison. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday evening in June. I blocked off the lab from Friday morning through Monday afternoon. The backup facility was prepped. The cleaning crew was briefed extensively. I spent the entire previous week moving samples, securing equipment, and triple-checking every measure. Madison was ecstatic. She sent me daily updates, the flowers, the menu, the guest list of 200 people. She'd hired one of the most exclusive wedding planners in the state. Trevor's family was sparing no expense. "This is going to be perfect," she'd gushed during our final planning meeting. "So perfect. You'll see. Everyone's going to talk about this wedding for years." She had no idea how right she was. Friday morning, the cleaners arrived at 6 a.m. I met them personally, walked them through every protocol, watched as they sanitized the atrium until it gleamed. By noon, the space was transformed, safe, clean, ready. The wedding planners arrived at 2 p.m. with a truck full of decorations. I'd expected elegance, understated sophistication. Madison had always had decent taste. What rolled through the door was Baroque excess. Crystal chandeliers on portable rigging, silk draping in ivory and gold, a flower wall that must have cost $10,000 alone. And the piece de resistance, a 10-tier wedding cake that required 4 people to wheel in, covered in fondant flowers and gold leaf, standing nearly 6 feet tall. "Where do you want this?" one of the planners asked, gesturing to the cake. "There's a climate-controlled storage area off the conference room," I said, already feeling uneasy. "Keep it there until right before the reception." But they'd already started setting up in the main atrium. Tables, chairs, a dance floor. The space was being completely transformed. I stood at the entrance to the laboratory wing, watching through the sealed doorway as my professional sanctuary became a wedding venue. My phone buzzed. A text from Madison. "Can't wait for tomorrow. Love you, sis." I should have stopped it then. Should have called it off. But I'd come too far, promised too much. I spent that night in my office, monitoring the security feeds, making sure no one went anywhere they shouldn't. The planners finished at midnight. Everything looked beautiful, I had to admit. Unrecognizable, but beautiful. Saturday dawned clear and perfect. I arrived at the lab at 7 a.m. to do a final check. Everything was in order. The ceremony would be at 6 p.m., cocktails and reception following. I'd be present the entire time, essentially working security to ensure no guests wandered into restricted areas. Madison arrived at noon with her bridal party for photos. She looked stunning in her gown, radiant with joy. She hugged me tight. "Thank you," she whispered, "for making this happen. I know it wasn't easy. Just promise me everyone will stay in the approved areas," I said. "Of course." "God, Sarah, stop worrying. It's going to be perfect. Guests began arriving at 5:30. I positioned myself near the laboratory entrance, now decorated with an enormous flower arrangement to disguise the sealed door. I watched as 200 people in designer clothes filled my workspace, drinking champagne, admiring the modern architecture. The ceremony was lovely. Madison cried. Trevor cried. My mother cried. Even my father looked misty-eyed. They exchanged vows under an arch of white roses in the center of the atrium, sunlight streaming through the glass ceiling. For a moment, I let myself relax. Maybe this would be okay. Maybe. Then I saw him. A groomsman, maybe 25, already drunk, trying the handle of the laboratory door. I crossed the room in seconds. That area's off limits. He grinned sloppily. Come on, let's see where the magic happens. Trevor said his sister-in-law does some crazy science stuff. Got any weird diseases in there? It's sealed for safety reasons. Please return to the reception. He rolled his eyes but complied. I made a mental note to watch him. Cocktail hour began. The bar was flowing freely. Guests grew louder, looser. I saw the same groomsman trying another door. Then a bridesmaid asking if she could see where they keep the microscopes. I was constantly moving, redirecting, guarding. Then dinner was served, and I thought maybe I could breathe. That's when I heard the crash. The cake. The enormous, ridiculous 6-foot cake had been wheeled out for the cutting ceremony. Madison and Trevor posed with the knife, smiling for 100 phone cameras. They made the first cut together, the crowd cheering. And then someone, I later learned it was Trevor's drunk cousin, bumped into the table. The cake was top-heavy, poorly balanced. The whole thing began to tilt, seeming to move in slow motion. I watched, frozen, as 10 tiers of fondant and buttercream toppled like a falling tower. But it didn't just fall to the floor. It fell backward, through a doorway that absolutely should have been locked but wasn't, into the corridor leading to Laboratory Wing B. The room erupted in chaos. Madison screamed. Trevor lunged forward. Guests crowded around, phones out, recording everything. And before I could stop them, a dozen people had rushed through that doorway, into the restricted area, tracking cake and frosting and champagne, and God knew what else across my sealed floors. Stop, I shouted, but my voice was lost in the commotion. I pushed through the crowd. Inside the corridor, I found cream-covered footprints leading deeper into the facility. The drunk groomsman had opened another door, the one leading to the main laboratory floor. More people were inside, laughing, taking selfies with the equipment, one woman in a cocktail dress actually touching a biosafety cabinet. Everyone out. I was screaming now, not caring about decorum. Out now. Madison appeared at my elbow, tears streaming down her face. Sarah, I'm so sorry. We'll clean it up. You've just contaminated a federal research facility. Get everyone out. It took 20 minutes to herd everyone back to the atrium. By then, the damage was done. Cake and frosting tracked through 3 separate rooms. A spilled champagne glass in Laboratory 4. Someone's lipstick-stained napkin on a workstation. And most horrifyingly, one of the drunk guests had actually opened a sample refrigerator and taken a selfie with it. I stood in the middle of the destruction, my carefully constructed protocols in ruins around me, and felt my career crumbling in real time. The reception continued. Madison was sobbing. My mother was trying to salvage the situation by ordering the catering staff to bring out backup desserts. Trevor's family looked scandalized, and I stood at the entrance to my violated laboratory, phone in hand, knowing exactly what I had to do. I called the Oversight Committee chair. At 9 p.m. on a Saturday, she answered on the 3rd ring. Dr. Reeves, is everything all right? No, I said, my voice eerily calm. We have a situation. I explained everything. The wedding, the breach, the contamination. She was silent for a long moment. You hosted a private event in a BSL-2 facility without authorization. Yes, and multiple untrained civilians accessed restricted areas. Yes. Sarah. She sounded tired, disappointed. You know what this means? I do. We'll need to file a report. Federal compliance will be notified. There will be an investigation. The facility will need to be shut down until a full decontamination and safety review can be conducted. I understand. I'm sorry, but you've left us no choice. You're suspended effective immediately pending the investigation outcome. I hung up and walked back to the reception. The party was winding down. Guests were leaving, whispering among themselves. Madison sat at the head table, mascara streaked, being comforted by Trevor. She saw me approaching and stood. Sarah, I'm so sorry. We'll pay for the cleaning. Whatever it takes. I never meant for. Federal investigators will be here Monday morning. I said quietly, you should probably get a lawyer. Her face went white. What? This isn't just my lab, Maddie. It's a federally funded facility with oversight from multiple government agencies. What happened tonight is a serious compliance violation. There will be investigations. Probably fines. Maybe criminal charges, depending on what they find. Criminal charges. Trevor had joined us now, his face flushed with alcohol and outrage. For what? A stupid cake fell over. For unauthorized access to a biosafety laboratory. For potentially compromising public health protocols. For contaminating a space that houses samples of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. I looked at my sister. You wanted a unique venue. Congratulations. You got one. My mother materialized beside us. Sarah, don't be dramatic. I'm sure this can all be handled quietly. Your father knows people. This isn't a parking ticket, Mom. This is federal law. And I've already reported it. Madison's sobs intensified. Trevor put his arm around her, glaring at me. You reported your own sister? What kind of person does that? The kind who just watched her career end because she was too weak to say no. I thought. But I didn't say it. I left them there in the ruins of the reception and went to my office to begin documenting everything. Every decision. Every compromise. Every moment that led to this disaster. I had maybe 48 hours before everything became official. I intended to use them. Sunday, I didn't sleep. I compiled every text message, every email, every recorded phone call. I documented the pressure from my family, the promises made, the guilt deployed. I wasn't trying to avoid responsibility. I knew what I'd done, but I was damn well going to make sure everyone understood why. Monday morning, the FBI arrived, along with representatives from the CDC and the National Institutes of Health. They sealed the facility. They interviewed me for 6 hours. I showed them everything, my protocols, my safety measures, the breach itself. You did maintain significant safety measures, one agent acknowledged. The damage could have been much worse. It shouldn't have happened at all, I said flatly. No, she agreed. It shouldn't have. They interviewed Madison next. Then Trevor. Then my parents. I heard later that Madison played the ignorant victim beautifully. She had no idea it was illegal. Her sister said it was fine. She just wanted a pretty venue. The agent wasn't buying it. You signed a liability waiver, Mrs. Huntington, one that explicitly mentioned federal regulations and biosafety protocols. According to your sister's documentation, she explained the risks multiple times. Madison's lawyer had arrived by then. Things got complicated fast. The investigation took 3 months. In that time, I was suspended without pay. My research was frozen. My grant funding was in jeopardy. The peptide trials stopped. Years of work just stopped. Madison and Trevor went on their honeymoon to Bora Bora and posted extensively about it on Instagram. My mother called once, suggesting I was handling this badly and making things worse for everyone. I hung up on her. My father didn't call at all. But something interesting happened. The story leaked. Not from me. I suspect from someone at Trevor's family's company, trying to spin it as my failure rather than their son's involvement. But once it was out, it spread. Scientist's career destroyed after allowing sister's wedding in federal lab. Family pressure leads to biosafety breach at research facility. When saying no to family costs everything. The narrative they'd tried to create, reckless scientist, stupid mistake, fell apart when the documentation came out. My detailed records showed months of pressure, emotional manipulation, and family coercion. The texts from my mother were particularly damning. So were Madison's tearful phone calls, which I'd recorded for my own protection. Suddenly, I wasn't the villain. I was the victim. The scientific community rallied. Colleagues who'd been silent during my suspension suddenly spoke up about the impossible pressures placed on women in STEM fields, about family dynamics that exploit success, about the cultural expectation that women sacrifice their careers for others' happiness. My story became a case study in professional ethics. I was invited to speak at conferences about maintaining boundaries. An article in The Atlantic titled, "The Price of Being a Dutiful Daughter," used my situation as its centerpiece. And then the investigation concluded. The findings were unambiguous. I had violated federal protocols by hosting an unauthorized event in a BSL-2 facility. However, my extensive safety measures, detailed documentation, and the obvious pattern of familial pressure were noted as mitigating factors. I was fined $15,000 and given a formal reprimand. My facility access was restored, but I was required to complete additional compliance training. Madison and Trevor were fined $50,000 each for their role in the breach. Trevor's drunk cousin, who'd opened the refrigerator, got an additional $25,000 fine and a court-ordered class on laboratory safety, which I found grimly amusing. But the real consequences were elsewhere. My institute, embarrassed by the publicity and federal scrutiny, didn't fire me. They couldn't, not with the public narrative firmly on my side. But they made it clear my future there was limited. The grant funding was restructured. My research team was reassigned. I should have been devastated. A month earlier, I would have been. But something had shifted during those 3 months of suspension. I'd been forced to stop, to step away from the work that had consumed me, to actually think about what I wanted from my life. The answer surprised me. Not this. I resigned in October with a carefully worded statement about pursuing new directions and grateful for the opportunities. Behind the scenes, I'd already accepted a position at a European research institute with an even larger budget, more autonomy, and zero ties to my family. The peptide research, I licensed it back to my original institute with very specific conditions about my continued involvement and royalties. If it ever makes it to market, I'll be compensated regardless of where I work. Madison called when she heard about my resignation. "Sarah, you're leaving the country? Because of me." "No," I said honestly. "Because of me. Because I finally realized that trying to make this family happy was destroying me. That's not fair. We've always supported you. You've always taken from me, Maddie. There's a difference. And I let you because I thought that's what love looked like. That's what family required. But it turns out I'm allowed to set boundaries. I'm allowed to say no. I should have said it months ago. So you're just abandoning us. I'm choosing myself, for the first time in my life." She hung up on me. My mother sent a lengthy email about duty and sacrifice and disappointing the family. My father remained silent. I booked my flight to Zurich and didn't look back. It's been 2 years now. My new lab is remarkable, state-of-the-art facilities, brilliant colleagues, actual work-life balance. The peptide research is moving forward, now in phase 3 trials. Early results are extraordinary. There's quiet talk of awards, recognition, the kind of validation I once craved desperately. But it doesn't define me anymore. I've learned to say no, to recognize manipulation, to value my own peace over others' approval. I have friends here, genuine ones, who aren't related to me by blood or obligation. I've started dating someone who thinks my work is interesting, but doesn't need me to be impressive, just present. Madison sends holiday cards to my European address. They're generic, impersonal. My mother occasionally emails with updates about family I barely recognize anymore. My father retired and never mentioned my name in his farewell speech at the hospital. I used to think that would hurt. The distance, the loss. Instead, it feels like breathing. Last month, I got an invitation. Madison's having a baby. There's a shower planned back in Connecticut. My mother's hosting. It's very important I attend, the email emphasized. Family is everything. It reminded me. I RSVP'd with a polite decline and a generous gift card. Because here's what I learned from building a $1 million laboratory and watching my sister destroy it with a wedding cake. Some things can be decontaminated, sterilized, and rebuilt. Others need to be permanently sealed off for your own safety. I built my life on the expectation that if I was smart enough, accomplished enough, successful enough, my family would finally see me as valuable, would treat me with the respect they'd always reserved for Madison, would stop taking and start giving. But value isn't something you earn from people who are determined not to see it. Respect isn't something you can achieve through accomplishment when those around you are invested in your servitude. My sister didn't ruin my career by using my lab for her wedding. She revealed the truth I'd been avoiding my entire adult life. I was never going to be enough for them because my purpose wasn't to be enough. It was to provide, to sacrifice, to enable their comfort at the cost of my own. The federal crisis, the investigation, the public scandal, it was all painful, humiliating, career-damaging in the moment, but it was also clarifying. Sometimes you need your life to fall apart before you realize you've been living it for the wrong people. Sometimes you need to lose everything you thought mattered to discover what actually does. My name is Dr. Sarah Reeves. I'm a microbiologist researching antibiotic resistance. I work in a beautiful lab in Europe where nobody asks me for favors I can't give, where boundaries are respected, where my value isn't contingent on my usefulness. And if that peptide ever makes it to market, if it saves even one life from a superbug infection, then everything, the manipulation, the betrayal, the crisis, the loss, will have been worth it. Not because my family will finally be proud. They won't be. They'll find some way to diminish it, to center themselves in my accomplishment, to remind me of some way I still owe them. But because I'll know what I built, what I discovered, what I protected, even when I failed to protect it the first time. And I'll know I did it for me. That's not revenge. That's freedom. And it's worth more than any laboratory,